The COO leaned back in his leather chair, fingers laced behind his head, that smug grin plastered across his face. "Your role's been outsourced, darling," Derek said, sliding a severance packet across the mahogany desk. My hands didn't shake as I reached into my blazer pocket and pulled out my official IRS Enrolled Agent badge, the one that authorized me to represent the company before the Internal Revenue Service. I placed it carefully on his desk, metal glinting under the fluorescent lights. "You'll need this," I said quietly, then walked out. My heels clicked against the concrete floor of the parking garage as I walked toward my car. Each step felt surreal, like I was watching myself from somewhere outside my body. 3 years. I had given TechVault Solutions 3 years of my life, building their compliance infrastructure from absolutely nothing. I remembered my first day like it was yesterday. The office had been a converted warehouse space in the industrial district, with exposed brick walls and 22 eager employees crammed around folding tables. Scott Brennan, the founder, had pulled me aside during lunch and said, "Mildred, I need someone who can keep us legal as we grow. Can you do that?" I had looked him in the eye and promised I could, and I had kept that promise. When I started, we were processing payroll for 23 people. Now we had over 400 employees across 6 states. I had registered us in every state, set up every payroll system, implemented every tax strategy, obtained every license and permit. I had built something I was proud of. Then Derek Hammond arrived, 6 months ago. He came from some failed Silicon Valley startup that had burned through $40 million in venture capital before imploding. Somehow, he convinced CEO Gregory Walsh and founder Scott that he was exactly what TechVault needed to scale to the next level. His first presentation to the leadership team was all buzzwords and nonsense. Synergize, optimize, disrupt, leverage offshore resources. I should have known then what was coming. Derek fixated on my department immediately. At his second board meeting, he presented a slide showing my salary, my team's salaries, and our total annual cost. $217,000, he had announced dramatically. For what? To file some forms and make sure we pay our taxes on time. I had tried to explain. Compliance isn't just filing forms. It's protecting the company from catastrophic legal liability. It's maintaining our enrolled agent authorization with the IRS. It's ensuring we don't accidentally commit federal crimes. Derek had laughed. Federal crimes? Come on, Mildred, you're fear-mongering. Over the next 4 months, Derek brought his plan to fruition. He found an offshore firm called Global Comp Services, based in the Philippines. They promised to handle all our compliance needs for $48,000 annually, nearly $170,000 in savings. I attended 4 separate meetings where I explained, in detail, why this wouldn't work. I showed them IRS regulations stating that only licensed enrolled agents, CPAs, or attorneys could represent companies before the IRS. I explained that certain tax decisions required someone with deep knowledge of U.S. law. I warned them about the penalties for unauthorized practice before the IRS. Derek called me resistant to innovation. Gregory said I was protecting my turf. Scott, who had once trusted me completely, stayed silent. Now I sat in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to process what had just happened. My phone buzzed. A text from Linda, the payroll manager who had reported to me for 2 years. "Mildred, can you call me? Please? It's urgent." I dialed her number. She answered on the first ring. "Oh, thank God," Linda said, her voice shaking. "Mildred, Global Comp just sent us new instructions. They're telling us to delay the quarterly payroll tax deposits by 30 days to improve cash flow. Is that legal?" My stomach dropped. No, absolutely not. Payroll taxes have to be deposited according to IRS schedules. If you delay them, the penalties are massive, 15% of the tax amount plus interest. But they're saying it's a standard practice, and that you've been doing it wrong all these years. "Linda," I said carefully, "I'm not your boss anymore. I can't give you official advice, but I can tell you this. Document everything in writing, every instruction they give you, every email, every phone call. Write down dates and times. You understand?" There was a long pause. "You're scaring me." "Good. You should be scared." I hung up and sat in the dark parking garage for another 20 minutes. Then I drove home. My apartment felt too quiet. I opened my laptop and checked my email out of habit. There was an automated notification from the IRS e-services portal. I clicked it absently, then froze. My enrolled agent authorization to represent TechVault Solutions had been automatically revoked. It happened the moment they terminated my employment. It was standard procedure, but the implications hit me like a physical blow. TechVault now had 0 authorized representatives before the IRS. 0. I clicked through to the IRS database and searched for TechVault Solutions. What I found made my blood run cold. Global Comp Services had already filed a Form 2848, the power of attorney form that would authorize them to represent TechVault before the IRS, but the signature on the form was Scott's. I recognized it. Or rather, I recognized the digital copy of his signature that we kept on file for routine documents. They had forged it. They had taken a digital signature and applied it to a federal form without proper authorization. That wasn't just a mistake. That was a federal crime. I sat back, mind racing. TechVault was about to walk into a disaster. Global Comp clearly had no idea what they were doing. They were giving illegal instructions, filing forms with forged signatures, and the company executives were too arrogant to see the danger. 400 innocent employees were about to suffer because Derek wanted to save money, and Scott and Gregory were too weak to stop him. I could walk away. I had been fired. I owed them nothing, but my conscience wouldn't let me do it. At 11:23 that night, I drafted an email to Gregory, Scott, and Derek. I kept it professional and detailed. I explained that unauthorized tax representation was a federal crime. I explained that delayed payroll tax deposits would trigger automatic penalties of up to 15% plus interest. I explained that the company was now operating without legal compliance coverage. I offered to consult for 2 weeks during the transition, no charge, just to prevent disaster. I read it over 3 times, checking every word. Then I hit send and went to bed. I woke to my phone buzzing at 6:47 in the morning. 3 new emails. I opened the first one, from Derek, sent at 6:02. Mildred, your email is a transparent attempt to sabotage this transition. Your fear-mongering and self-serving predictions are unprofessional and frankly pathetic. Global Comp comes highly recommended and has extensive experience in compliance outsourcing. Your suggestions that we are engaging in illegal activity are slanderous and potentially actionable. I am copying our legal counsel on this email. The second email was from Harold Jensen, the company attorney. His response was just as dismissive. Derek, I have reviewed Mildred's claims and find them to be overblown. Global Comp is a reputable firm with international certifications. While I appreciate Mildred's concern, I believe we are on solid legal ground. Mildred, I would advise you to refrain from further communications that could be construed as attempts to interfere with business operations. The third email was from Gregory. It was brief. Mildred, thank you for your input. We have it under control. Scott hadn't responded at all. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my phone. They had ignored every warning. Worse, they were treating my concerns as malicious. Fine. I had tried. I took screenshots of all the emails and saved them to a secure folder. Then I tried to move on with my life. I updated my resume. I reached out to my professional network. I scheduled coffee meetings with former colleagues. I tried to stay positive. The job market for compliance professionals was strong. I had credentials and experience. I would land on my feet. 3 days passed. I started to feel a little better. Maybe I had overreacted. Maybe Global Comp knew what they were doing after all. Then Linda called again. Mildred. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I need to tell you something, but you can't tell anyone it came from me. Linda, what's wrong? Global Comp sent new instructions today. They're telling us to reclassify 58 of our W-2 employees as 1099 independent contractors. They say it'll save us nearly $300,000 in payroll taxes annually. I felt my throat tighten. Which employees? Software developers, customer support staff, 2 project managers, people who have been full-time employees for years. Linda, they're describing tax fraud. Those people aren't contractors. They're employees by every IRS definition. They work set hours, they use company equipment, They work exclusively for TechVault. Reclassifying them is illegal. I know, Linda said. I told Patricia. I told the accounting team. They said Global Comp is the expert now and we have to follow their instructions. Patricia said if I wasn't comfortable with it, I should resign. Patricia Coleman, the CFO. She had always been ambitious, always eager to cut costs and impress the board. Apparently her ambition now outweighed her judgment. Linda, I said slowly, are you in a safe place to talk? I'm in my car, in the parking lot behind Target. Good. Listen to me carefully. Document everything, every instruction, every conversation, every email. Save it all to your personal accounts. Do you understand? Yes. But Mildred, I'm scared. What if they find out I'm talking to you? Then lie. Tell them I called you. Tell them I'm harassing you. Whatever keeps you safe. After I hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. This was worse than I thought. Much worse. That afternoon, a certified letter arrived at my apartment. I signed for it with a growing sense of dread. It was from Harold Jensen, TechVault's attorney. The letter was 3 pages of legal threats. It accused me of unauthorized access to company systems after my termination. It claimed I had hacked into their payroll software to steal confidential information. It demanded I sign a non-disclosure agreement and a sworn statement that I would not disparage the company. If I refused, they would pursue criminal charges. I read it twice, my hands shaking with rage. I had never accessed their systems after my termination. I didn't need to. Linda had called me. But they were setting me up. They were creating a paper trail that would make me the scapegoat if anything went wrong. I called Linda immediately. Did anyone ask you about our phone calls? Patricia pulled me into her office this morning, Linda said. She asked if you had contacted me. I said no. I was too scared to tell the truth. Good. Keep denying it. That evening, my doorbell rang at 7:30. I looked through the peephole and saw a man in a polo shirt holding a clipboard. I opened the door. Can I help you? Are you Mildred Hayes? Yes. He handed me a manila envelope. You've been served. Have a good evening. I stood in my doorway, envelope in hand, as he walked back to his car. My hands were trembling as I tore it open. It was a lawsuit. TechVault Solutions versus Mildred Hayes. They were suing me for $5 million. The complaint alleged breach of fiduciary duty, theft of trade secrets, and tortious interference with business relationships. According to the lawsuit, I had sabotaged compliance systems before leaving. I had stolen confidential information. I was now attempting to destroy the company's relationship with its new compliance provider. Every single allegation was false, but defending myself would cost tens of thousands in legal fees I didn't have. I had been fired. I was being sued. I was facing potential financial ruin, and TechVault was still headed straight for an IRS disaster. I couldn't afford an attorney, not a real one anyway, but I had something better than money. I had documentation. For 3 years, I had kept meticulous records. Every warning I gave was documented in emails. Every meeting where I raised concerns was memorialized in follow-up messages. Every decision I recommended was supported by IRS regulations and case law. I had learned early in my career that memory is unreliable. Documentation is forever. I spent the next 3 days drafting my response to the lawsuit. I represented myself pro se, which sounds impressive, but really just means I couldn't afford a lawyer. My response was 37 pages long, with 42 pages of exhibits attached. Exhibit A was the email chain where I warned about unauthorized IRS representation. Exhibit B was my detailed memo about payroll tax deposit requirements. Exhibits C through Q were meeting notes, compliance reports, and regulatory citations. Exhibit R through Z were the threatening emails I had received after trying to help. I filed the response at the courthouse myself. The clerk looked at the thickness of the document and raised her eyebrows. You write all this yourself? Every word. Good luck, she said, and I couldn't tell if she meant it or if she pitied me. 2 weeks later, everything changed. Scott Brennan was sitting in his corner office, reviewing the quarterly revenue projections, when his email notification chimed. He glanced at it absently, expecting another investor update or sales report. Instead, he saw a subject line that made his blood freeze. Subject: Notice of Investigation. Tech Vault Solutions Incorporated. Sender: Internal Revenue Service, Criminal Investigation Division. Scott opened the email with shaking hands. Dear Mr. Brennan, this letter is to inform you that the Internal Revenue Service Criminal Investigation Division has received information regarding potential employment tax fraud, unauthorized representation before the IRS, and falsification of federal documents by Tech Vault Solutions Incorporated. We are conducting an investigation into these matters pursuant to Title 26, United States Code. You are required to preserve all documents, electronic records, and communications related to tax compliance, payroll administration, and relationships with third-party service providers for the period of January 2022 through present. Additionally, we are scheduling an in-person meeting at your offices located at 8734 Industrial Parkway on November 14th at 10 o'clock in the morning. Attendance by the following individuals is mandatory: Chief Executive Officer, Chief Financial Officer, General Counsel, and any current or former compliance officers. Failure to cooperate fully with this investigation may result in additional charges of obstruction of justice. Scott read the email 3 times. Then he picked up his phone and called an emergency board meeting. 40 minutes later, Gregory, Derek, Harold, and CFO Patricia Coleman sat around the conference table. Scott forwarded the email to all of them without saying a word. Patricia went pale as she read it. Her hands gripped the edge of the table. This is probably routine, Derek said, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. They send these things out all the time. It's just the IRS covering themselves. Harold shook his head slowly. No, Criminal Investigation Division doesn't do routine audits. They only get involved when they suspect serious crimes. What crimes? Gregory demanded. We haven't done anything wrong. Scott looked at him. We outsourced our compliance to a firm in the Philippines. We let them file tax documents. We ignored Mildred's warnings. Mildred was being paranoid, Derek snapped. Global Comp is a professional firm. Then where are they? Harold asked. We need to contact them immediately. Derek pulled out his phone and dialed Global Comp's main number. It rang 4 times before someone answered. Global Comp Services. How may I direct your call? I need to speak with your compliance coordinator. This is urgent. 1 moment, please. Hold music played for 2 minutes. Then a cheerful voice came on the line. Hello, this is customer service. How can I help you? I need to speak with whoever is handling Tech Vault Solutions compliance. Let me check. Can you spell that company name? Derek spelled it slowly, his jaw clenched. I see the account. Let me transfer you to your coordinator. More hold music. 3 minutes passed. Then the line went dead. Derek called back. He was transferred twice more. He left 3 voicemails. No one called back. Patricia broke the silence. Where is our IRS authorization paperwork? The Form 2848 that gives Global Comp power of attorney? Derek hesitated. Global Comp has it. Do we have a copy? Another hesitation. I thought they sent us one. Patricia pushed back from the table and walked quickly to Derek's office. She returned 2 minutes later holding something small and metallic. Mildred's IRS Enrolled Agent badge. She placed it on the conference table. I found this in Derek's desk drawer. This is her credential, the one that authorized her to represent us before the IRS. Scott stared at it. His face drained of color. She's the only person who could represent us, and we fired her. Derek tried to defend himself. I didn't think it was important. It's just a badge. It's not just a badge, Harold said quietly. It's a federal authorization. Without it, without her, we have no one who can legally speak for us before the IRS. The reality settled over the room like a heavy fog. They had fired their compliance officer. They had hired an unqualified offshore firm. They had filed documents with forged signatures. And now the IRS Criminal Investigation Division was coming. We need Mildred back, Gregory said. Right now. They tried calling my number. It was disconnected. I had changed it after receiving harassing calls from unknown numbers. They emailed me. The messages bounced back. I had blocked all TechVault domains. Scott drove to my old apartment. The landlord told him I had moved out 2 weeks ago, leaving no forwarding address except with the post office. They had made an enemy of the one person who could save them. But the worst was yet to come. Patricia spent the rest of the afternoon reviewing the tax returns Global Comp had filed for the most recent quarter. What she found made her physically ill. They had claimed deductions the company wasn't eligible for. They had misclassified nearly $2 million in revenue. They had taken aggressive tax positions that had no legal basis. The errors would trigger an automatic audit. The penalties could exceed $3 million. Patricia walked into Scott's office at 6:15 that evening. She closed the door behind her. "We have a serious problem," she said. Scott looked up from his computer. "More serious than the IRS investigation?" Patricia nodded. "We're not just facing an audit. We're facing criminal prosecution for tax fraud." Scott closed his laptop slowly. "How did this happen?" "We fired the one person who knew what she was doing, and we replaced her with people who have no idea what they're doing." Scott buried his face in his hands. Harold called an emergency meeting with just Scott, Gregory, and Derek. No one else. What he presented was a legal strategy born of desperation. "We need to control the narrative," Harold said. "The IRS is going to ask who made these decisions, who authorized these filings, who was responsible for compliance." "We all know who was responsible," Derek said quickly. "Mildred set up all these systems before she left. If there's something wrong, it's because she designed it wrong." Harold nodded. "That's exactly the position we need to take. Mildred created the compliance infrastructure. If it has flaws, that's on her. Global Comp made innocent mistakes because Mildred's documentation was inadequate." "But that isn't true," Scott said quietly. "Truth is flexible in legal proceedings," Harold replied. "What matters is what we can argue convincingly. And we have evidence. Mildred's emails after her termination show she was angry and unstable. Her offer to consult can be portrayed as an attempt to cover her tracks." Gregory leaned forward. "What about the whistleblower report?" "The IRS said they received information. It had to come from someone internal." Harold smiled grimly. "Exactly. And who had the most access to sensitive compliance information? Who had the most motive to hurt the company?" "Mildred filed that report out of spite." "But we don't know that," Scott protested. "We don't need to know it. We just need to argue it plausibly." Scott felt sick, but he saw no other option. The company he had built from nothing was collapsing. If they didn't find someone to blame, they would all go down. They amended the lawsuit against me. The new complaint added claims of fraudulent compliance system design and intentional creation of tax liabilities. They alleged I had deliberately set up TechVault to fail IRS scrutiny as revenge for anticipated termination. I received the amended lawsuit on a Tuesday afternoon. I was living in a studio apartment 30 miles outside the city, in a building where the elevator only worked half the time. My savings were nearly gone. I was eating cheap pasta and skipping lunch most days. The new allegations were devastating. They weren't just claiming I had made mistakes. They were claiming I had committed intentional fraud. I applied for 6 compliance jobs that week. 3 didn't respond. 2 sent polite rejection emails. 1 invited me for an interview, then called the next day to rescind the offer. A background check had revealed the lawsuit. No one would hire someone being accused of compliance fraud. It didn't matter that the allegations were false. The accusation alone was enough to destroy my career. I had panic attacks at night, lying in my narrow bed, staring at the ceiling. I imagined bankruptcy. I imagined criminal charges. I imagined never working in my field again. I was 34 years old and my life was over. The IRS meeting arrived on a cold November morning. 2 agents from the Criminal Investigation Division showed up at TechVault's offices at exactly 10 o'clock. Special Agent Thomas Crawford and Special Agent Jennifer Bailey. Both carried briefcases and wore expressions that revealed nothing. They interviewed Scott, Gregory, Derek, Patricia, and Harold separately. Each interview lasted over an hour. The questions were precise and surgical. Agent Crawford sat across from Derek in a small conference room. "Who authorized the decision to delay payroll tax deposits?" Derek shifted uncomfortably. That was a recommendation from our new compliance provider, Global Comp Services. And who hired Global Comp? I did, after careful evaluation of their credentials and references. Did you consult with your previous compliance officer about this decision? Mildred? No. She was resistant to change. She had a vested interest in maintaining her position. Agent Crawford made a note. Who signed the Form 2848 authorizing Global Comp to represent TechVault before the IRS? Scott Brennan, our founder. Did Mr. Brennan physically sign that document? Derek hesitated. I believe it was signed electronically. By Mr. Brennan personally? I assume so. Agent Crawford looked up. You assume? You don't know? It was handled by Global Comp. They managed the paperwork. Agent Bailey interviewed Patricia in another room. Who made the decision to reclassify employees as independent contractors? Patricia folded her hands on the table. That was recommended by Global Comp. They assured us it was legal and standard practice. Did you consult with legal counsel? Our attorney, Harold Jensen, reviewed it. And what was his opinion? He said we should trust our compliance provider's expertise. Did anyone raise concerns about this reclassification? Patricia paused. Linda Morales, our payroll manager, had some questions, but Global Comp addressed them. Agent Bailey made a note. What were Miss Morales' concerns? She thought the employees didn't meet the criteria for contractor status, but she isn't a tax expert. When the agents interviewed Harold, they asked pointed questions about the lawsuit against me. You filed suit against your former compliance officer, is that correct? Agent Crawford asked. Yes. Mildred Hayes. On what grounds? Breach of fiduciary duty and fraud. We believe she deliberately created compliance vulnerabilities before her termination. What evidence do you have of this? Harold shifted. Her behavior after termination was suspicious. She sent multiple emails trying to interfere with our transition to a new provider. She made dire predictions that we now believe were attempts to cover her own mistakes. So you believe Miss Hayes may have filed the whistleblower report with the IRS? That's our working theory. Agent Crawford closed his notebook. Thank you for your time. 3 days later, the agents came to my apartment. I saw them through the peephole and my heart stopped. I thought I was being arrested. I opened the door with shaking hands. Miss Hayes? Agent Crawford showed his badge. May we come in? I let them inside my tiny studio. I had one chair, so I offered it to Agent Bailey while Agent Crawford and I remained standing. We're here to ask you some questions about TechVault Solutions, Agent Crawford said. You're not under arrest and you're not required to speak with us, but we'd appreciate your cooperation. I told them I would cooperate fully. What choice did I have? They asked me to explain how I had set up TechVault's compliance systems. I walked them through everything, step by step. I showed them my documentation. I pulled up email chains on my laptop, showing where I had warned about risks and recommended controls. I explained how I had objected to the outsourcing plan, how I had warned about the legal requirements for IRS representation, how I had tried to help even after being fired. Agent Bailey took notes while I talked. When I finished, she looked at Agent Crawford. She's not our subject, she said. She's our witness. Relief flooded through me. But then Agent Crawford asked a question that changed everything. Miss Hayes, did you file a report with the IRS whistleblower office? I stared at him. What? No. I don't even know what that is. Agent Bailey explained. The IRS whistleblower office accepts reports about tax fraud. Whistleblowers can receive a percentage of any recovered taxes. Someone filed a detailed report about TechVault. It included internal documents that only a compliance officer would have access to. It wasn't me, I said firmly. The agents exchanged glances. If it wasn't you, Agent Crawford said slowly, then who was it? The question hung in the air. Someone inside TechVault had reported the company to the IRS. Someone with access to sensitive documents. Someone who knew enough to file a detailed, credible report. And TechVault thought it was me. I was being blamed for something I hadn't even done. But worse, I realized the company's situation was even more dire than anyone knew. The real whistleblower was still inside the company, watching everything unfold. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, mind spinning through possibilities, Who had access to compliance documents? Who would have the knowledge to file a credible whistleblower report? Linda? She was my payroll manager. She had access to everything. But she was terrified of losing her job. Would she really take that risk? Patricia? She was the CFO. She certainly had access. But she had gone along with Derek's plans. Why would she report her own company? Someone else? A member of my old team? An accountant who saw what was happening and decided to act? Whoever it was, they were trying to protect the company by exposing the fraud. But TechVault was too arrogant to see it. They assumed I was the whistleblower because it fit their narrative. It gave them someone to blame. 2 weeks crawled by. I checked my mailbox obsessively. I refreshed my email compulsively. I knew something was coming. I could feel it. Then the subpoena arrived. United States District Court, grand jury subpoena. I was ordered to appear before a federal grand jury investigating TechVault solutions. I was required to bring all documents related to TechVault's compliance systems, tax filings, and communications with company executives. Grand juries only convene when prosecutors are considering criminal charges. My hands shook as I read the subpoena. I called the number listed for the public defender's office. They connected me with an attorney named Angela Porter. Angela met me at a coffee shop near the courthouse. She was in her late 40s, with gray streaks in her dark hair, and exhaustion written into the lines around her eyes. She carried a worn leather briefcase and ordered black coffee. "Tell me everything," she said. I did. It took 45 minutes. When I finished, Angela sat back and rubbed her temples. "You're in the worst possible position. You're both a witness and a potential target. The company is going to try to shift all blame to you, and you don't have the resources to fight back. But I didn't do anything wrong. I believe you. But prosecutors build cases on what they can prove, not what they believe. And right now, you're the common denominator. You set up the systems. You had access to everything. You sent those emails after termination. From a prosecutor's perspective, you look suspicious. So, what do I do? Testify honestly. Bring your documentation. Show them you're credible. And pray the prosecutor is smart enough to see the truth." Meanwhile, TechVault's board was making desperate moves. They hired a crisis management firm for $30,000 a month. They hired a white-collar criminal defense team from a major law firm in Chicago. The retainer alone was $300,000. Their legal strategy was simple: full cooperation with the IRS while maintaining that all problems stemmed from my sabotage. They produced a 50-page report, professionally formatted with charts and graphs, detailing how I had allegedly implemented compliance systems with intentional vulnerabilities. The report was complete fiction, but it looked authoritative. They submitted it to the IRS and to the grand jury. My grand jury testimony was scheduled for a Wednesday morning in December. I arrived at the federal courthouse at 8:30, wearing the only suit I still owned. Angela met me in the hallway. "Remember," she said, "answer truthfully. Don't speculate. If you don't know something, say I don't know. Don't try to defend yourself, just answer the questions." The grand jury room was smaller than I expected. 23 ordinary citizens sat in chairs arranged in a semicircle. The prosecutor, Assistant United States Attorney Sarah Hendricks, stood at a podium. "Miss Hayes, please state your name for the record." Mildred Hayes. For the next 2 hours, Sarah Hendricks walked me through every decision I had made, every system I had implemented, every warning I had given. She was tough, but fair. She asked about technical details, regulatory requirements, industry standards. I answered every question honestly and completely. I showed them my contemporaneous notes proving I had objected to every illegal scheme. I explained that I had designed legitimate legal compliance systems, but I could see some grand jurors looking skeptical. TechVault's attorneys had already poisoned the well. After my testimony, Angela pulled me aside in the hallway. "I need to be straight with you. The prosecutor is considering charging you as a co-conspirator." My legs nearly gave out. "What? How?" "The theory is that you set up the compliance systems, so you're responsible for any flaws. Your warnings after termination could be seen as trying to cover your tracks. But I was trying to prevent the fraud." "I know. But prosecutors see patterns. They see a compliance officer who worked for 3 years, then suddenly started warning about problems only after being fired. To them, that looks suspicious. What do I do? Angela took a deep breath. There's one option. Plead guilty to a lesser charge. Conspiracy to defraud the United States, maybe. Cooperate fully, and testify against the executives. You'd probably get probation. No prison time. Absolutely not. I didn't do anything wrong. The alternative is going to trial, which you cannot afford. A federal trial costs hundreds of thousands in legal fees, and if you lose, you're looking at 20 years in federal prison. I walked out of the courthouse in a daze. My entire life had collapsed. I lost my job, my career, my savings. Now I faced potential prison time for crimes I hadn't committed. I sat in my car in the parking garage and sobbed. I had never felt so alone, so powerless, so defeated. I thought about taking the plea deal. At least it'd avoid prison, but it would mean admitting to crimes I didn't commit. My enrolled agent license would be revoked permanently. I would be a convicted felon. I would never work in compliance again. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Mildred? It's Linda. Linda's voice was thick with tears. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know what else to do. My heart stopped. Linda, what did you do? I'm the whistleblower. I filed the report with the IRS. I had to. They were breaking the law and hurting people. But Mildred, they found out. Derek knows it was me. How? I don't know. Maybe he traced something. Maybe someone saw me. But he called me into his office yesterday. He knows. What did he say? Linda was crying harder now. He said, if I come forward, hell have me deported. Mildred, I'm a DACA recipient. My immigration status is precarious. I have 3 children. They're all U.S. citizens. But if I get deported, what happens to them? My mind raced. Derek was blackmailing a witness. That was obstruction of justice. That was witness intimidation. Both federal crimes. But proving it would be nearly impossible. It was Linda's word against his. Unless we could get him to say it again. On record. Linda, I said slowly, do not come forward yet. Let me handle this. But you're being blamed for what I did. I know. But if you come forward now, Derek will destroy you. We need a different approach. What approach? We need to make Derek incriminate himself. I spent 3 days planning. 3 days researching laws, reading cases, understanding exactly what evidence we needed. I was done being defensive, done being reactive, done being a victim. I was going to war. I called Linda and explained the plan. It was risky. If it failed, she would lose everything. But if it worked, we would have Derek on tape committing federal crimes. Linda agreed. She was terrified but determined. The next morning, Linda went to work early. She set up her smartphone in her purse, camera facing outward, audio recording enabled. Then she went to Derek's office. I listened on the phone from my car parked 3 blocks away. My own phone was recording everything. Derek, Linda said, her voice shaking. I need to talk to you. What is it? Derek sounded annoyed. This whole situation with Mildred and the IRS. I can't stay quiet anymore. People are getting hurt. I'm thinking about coming forward. There was a long pause. Coming forward with what? Derek's voice had changed. It was colder now, with what I know. About the tax fraud. About the forged signatures. About everything. Linda, Derek said slowly, I don't think that's a good idea. I have to do what's right. Let me be very clear with you. If you go to the IRS, if you talk to the prosecutors, I will personally make sure Immigration and Customs Enforcement knows about your status. Those kids of yours will watch you get deported. Is that what you want? I could barely breathe, listening. He was actually saying it. He was actually threatening her. That's illegal, Linda said. You can't threaten me like that. Derek laughed. Who is going to believe you? You're just an illegal immigrant. I'm a C-suite executive. Think very carefully about your children before you do something stupid. Linda left his office shaking. She walked straight to her car, retrieved her phone, and drove to meet me. You got it? She asked. I got it, I said, holding up my phone. Every word. We drove directly to Angela's office. Angela listened to the recording twice, her expression hardening with each sentence. This is witness intimidation and obstruction of justice. Federal crimes. We need to get this to the prosecutor immediately. We went straight to Sarah Hendricks' office in the federal building. Sarah was in a meeting, but her assistant said it was urgent enough to interrupt. Sarah listened to the recording in silence. When it finished, she looked at Linda. "Are you willing to testify about this?" "Yes," Linda said. "I'm done being scared." Sarah picked up her phone. "Get me the FBI field office. Now." The next morning at 6:47, FBI agents executed search warrants at TechVault's offices and Derek's home. They seized computers, phones, documents, and backup drives. Derek was arrested at his home at 7:15. He answered the door in pajamas and a bathrobe. The agents read him his rights while his neighbors watched from their windows. He was charged with obstruction of justice, witness intimidation, and conspiracy to commit tax fraud. The news coverage was immediate. Local television stations showed footage of Derek being led to a federal vehicle in handcuffs. The headline on the Business News website read, "TechVault Coup Arrested in Federal Investigation." I watched the coverage from my apartment. I felt no satisfaction, no joy, just exhaustion and relief. TechVault employees arrived at work to find FBI agents still searching the building. Scott called another emergency board meeting. This time, only Gregory, Patricia, and Harold attended. Derek was in federal custody. With Derek arrested, the investigation pivoted entirely. Forensic accountants went through every financial record. What they found was worse than anyone imagined. Derek had been embezzling money through the outsourcing scheme. Global Comp Services was partially owned by a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands. That shell company was controlled by Derek through a series of intermediaries. Every dollar saved on compliance went partially into Derek's pocket. He had stolen over $400,000 in less than 6 months. The tax fraud wasn't incompetence. It was intentional. Derek was planning to let TechVault collapse under IRS penalties while he disappeared with millions in embezzled funds. Gregory and Scott were interviewed again by the IRS, this time with their new attorneys present. Faced with evidence of Derek's crimes, they cooperated fully. They admitted they had ignored my warnings. They admitted the lawsuit against me was Derek's idea. They admitted they had no evidence I had done anything wrong. They weren't off the hook. They still faced civil penalties for negligent supervision, but they avoided criminal charges. Harold, the company attorney, was fired immediately. The state bar opened a disciplinary investigation against him for participating in the cover-up. His law license was suspended pending the outcome. Patricia cut a deal with the prosecutors. She would testify against Derek and help untangle the financial fraud. In exchange, she received immunity from prosecution. Sarah Hendricks called me into her office the following week. She sat across from me at a small conference table. "All charges against you are dropped," she said. "We're issuing a formal letter clearing you of any wrongdoing. I'm sorry for what you've been through." I felt tears building but held them back. "Thank you." "There's something else," Sarah said. Linda Morales filed her whistleblower claim properly with the IRS Whistleblower Office. The IRS penalties and recovered taxes from TechVault are going to exceed $18 million. As the whistleblower, she's entitled to 15 to 30% of that. I did the math quickly. Linda would receive between $2.7 and $5.4 million. But, Sarah continued, Linda submitted a declaration stating that you helped her document everything, that you encouraged her to come forward, that you protected her identity at great personal cost. She's requesting that you be designated as a co-whistleblower. I stared at her. I didn't file the report. No. But you enabled it. And the IRS has agreed. You'll split the award 50-50. I couldn't speak. I was going to receive over $1 million, maybe more than $2 million, depending on the final penalties. Linda did this. I finally managed. She did. She said, "You saved her family. This is how she wants to thank you." TechVault's board terminated their lawsuit against me within 48 hours, but they didn't stop there. They offered a settlement, $1.2 million, a full public apology published on their website and sent to every client, and a reference letter stating I had been terminated without cause. I hired my own attorney this time, a sharp woman named Brenda Matthews who specialized in employment law. Brenda negotiated aggressively. $2 million, she told them. Plus the company establishes a compliance training program named after Mildred, and you fund it with $100,000 annually for 5 years. They agreed within 2 hours. It was cheaper than continuing the IRS investigation and the terrible publicity. My whistleblower award came through 4 months later, $2.3 million. Combined with the settlement, I had over $4 million. I sat in my studio apartment, looking at my bank balance on my laptop and cried, not from happiness, not from relief, from the sheer emotional exhaustion of everything I had survived. Derek's trial was swift. The evidence was overwhelming. He was convicted on 14 federal counts including tax fraud, embezzlement, obstruction of justice, and witness intimidation. The judge sentenced him to 8 years in federal prison and ordered him to pay $4.3 million in restitution. His assets were seized. His house was sold at auction. In court, Derek tried to apologize to me. He stood at the defense table and looked in my direction. Mildred, I know I hurt you, and I am truly sorry. I didn't acknowledge him. I didn't need his apology. I didn't need anything from him. TechVault survived, but barely. They paid $18 million to the IRS. Their insurance helped, but the financial and reputational damage was catastrophic. Scott stepped down as CEO. The board pushed him out quietly with a severance package and a non-disparagement agreement. Gregory was demoted to a vice president role with no executive authority. They hired a new chief compliance officer, a woman named Janet Warren with 20 years of experience at a major accounting firm. They paid her $350,000 annually, plus equity. Janet's first act was to invite me to consult on rebuilding the compliance systems. I declined politely. I was done with TechVault. That chapter of my life was closed. Linda used her whistleblower award to hire an immigration attorney. She applied for a U visa, available to victims of crimes who cooperate with law enforcement. Her application was approved. She was on a path to citizenship. She quit her payroll job at TechVault and started her own bookkeeping business. I was her first client. We became close friends. Our kids played together on weekends. Her daughter called me Aunt Mildred. I used my money to start my own compliance consulting firm, Hayes Compliance Solutions. I specialized in helping small and mid-sized companies build ethical, legal compliance systems. My reputation spread quickly. I was known as someone who couldn't be bought, couldn't be intimidated, couldn't be corrupted. Companies wanted that integrity. Within a year, I had 23 employees. The number was intentional. It was the same number TechVault had when I first started there. But this time, I treated my employees with respect. I paid them well. I created a culture where ethics mattered more than profits. I never forgot what it felt like to be disposable. I was invited to speak at compliance conferences across the country. I told my story openly, holding nothing back. My message was simple but powerful. Compliance isn't a cost center. It's your company's immune system. Cut it out, and you die. Business schools invited me to lecture. MBA students listened wide-eyed as I described what happened when executives valued savings over safety. I became something of a minor celebrity in the compliance world. But I stayed humble. I remembered where I came from. I moved to a beautiful apartment overlooking the river. Floor-to-ceiling windows, hardwood floors, a kitchen where I actually cooked. I adopted a rescue dog, a scruffy terrier mix I named Justice. The irony made me smile every time I called her name. I started dating again. I met Patrick at a community volunteering event. He was a high school history teacher, kind and thoughtful and funny. He made me laugh. He reminded me that I was more than my job, more than my trauma. I started therapy to process everything I had been through. My therapist helped me understand that what happened wasn't my fault. I had done the right thing, even when it cost me everything. Slowly, over months, and then years, I healed. 1 year to the day after I placed my badge on Derek's desk, I stood in my new office unpacking boxes. Hayes Compliance Solutions was moving to a larger space. We needed room for 5 more employees. I found my old IRS Enrolled Agent badge in a drawer. I held it up to the light, watching it gleam. It wasn't just a piece of metal anymore. It represented my integrity, my courage, my refusal to compromise my principles, even when the entire world seemed aligned against me. I had it framed professionally, with a simple black frame and white matting. I hung it on the wall behind my desk. Below it, I placed a small brass plaque with an inscription I had chosen carefully. The cost of integrity is always worth it. Every client who came to my office saw that badge and that message, and they understood what kind of person they were working with. I learned so much from everything that happened. I learned that doing the right thing often costs you everything in the short term: your job, your reputation, your financial security, your peace of mind. But compromising your integrity costs you everything in the long term: your self-respect, your ability to sleep at night, your sense of who you are. I learned that the people who matter will stand by you. Linda risked everything to protect me. Angela fought for me when I couldn't afford a real lawyer. Even some of my former colleagues reached out quietly to offer support. And the people who don't matter will reveal themselves quickly. Derek, Gregory, Scott, Harold. They showed me exactly who they were when the pressure was on. I learned that patience and documentation defeat arrogance and corruption every single time. I kept records. I stayed calm. I let the system work, even when it seemed like the system was working against me. Most importantly, I learned that you can't control how others treat you. You can't control their decisions, their ethics, their choices. But you can control who you are. You can control your integrity. You can control whether you compromise your values for convenience or comfort. And when you stay true to yourself, even when it hurts, even when it costs you everything, you can look yourself in the mirror. You can sleep peacefully at night. That's worth more than any job, any salary, any corporate title. 3 years after everything fell apart, I received a letter. It was from a young woman named Sarah Miller, a recent college graduate who wanted to work in compliance. The letter said, "I heard you speak at my university last spring. You inspired me to pursue this career. You showed me that compliance isn't just about following rules. It's about protecting people and doing what's right, even when it's hard. I want to work for someone who values integrity over profit. Would you consider hiring me?" I smiled as I read her words. I picked up my phone and called the number on the letter. "Sarah? This is Mildred Hayes. When can you start?" She started 2 weeks later. Eager, idealistic, passionate about doing good work. She reminded me of myself 8 years ago. I trained her carefully. I taught her not just the regulations and procedures, but the principles behind them. I taught her that compliance is about protecting people, not just protecting companies. I taught her to document everything, to speak up when something is wrong, to never compromise her integrity, no matter what pressure she faces. The cycle continues. Good people training the next generation of good people, passing down not just knowledge but values. That's how you change the world, not through grand gestures or dramatic moments, but through daily choices, through mentoring and teaching, through living your values even when it's inconvenient. One person at a time, one principled decision at a time. I finally have peace. Not because I won, not because Derek went to prison or because I received money, but because I never compromised who I was, even when they tried to break me. Even when it seemed like I had lost everything. I stayed true to myself. I did the right thing. And that, I realize now, is the greatest victory of all. The badge on my wall reminds me every single day. Integrity has a cost, but it's always, always worth paying. So let me ask you something. Have you ever been in a situation where doing the right thing cost you dearly? Where standing up for your principles meant losing something important? I would love to hear your story in the comments below. Your experience might inspire someone else who is struggling with a difficult choice right now. If this story resonated with you, if it reminded you why integrity matters, please hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel for more stories about ordinary people facing extraordinary challenges and finding the courage to do what's right. And please share this video with someone who might need to hear this message today. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I hope it reminds you that even in your darkest moments, even when it seems like the whole world is against you, staying true to yourself is always the right choice. Your integrity is the one thing no one can take from you unless you give it away. Take care of yourselves and remember, the cost of integrity is always worth it.